you is that if you can find 20 minutes a day to make meditation part of your daily schedule and practice further at home, then you tend to find that will make the practice come more easily to you. Yeah, practice makes perfect. There's also 2 or 3 choices about how exactly to proceed with the meditation, depending on what you focus on. And if you're able to fill in those questionnaires before you go back, then by next week I should be able to have some more detailed advice for you personally about what might be the best way forward. So that's the reason for the pieces of paper. Yeah. This evening, though, we come to the subject of friends in the sense of the influence that one has on others as a friend, and the influence that others have on us as a friend. Living in a fairly individualist society, possibly we like to flatter ourselves that everything great that happens in our life happened because, well, we're just such a great person. And no one else really sort of contributed very much at all. It's just like we were born like that. But if you look back even to the successes in your life, where maybe you've come a long way in your education, or reached a good position in your workplace, and often you can look back and pinpoint people who've had a particular influence on you when you're making decisions which got you to that point. Even coming along to a meditation center, you can probably look back and see the influential people getting you to do that too. So there's a sense in which other people contribute to good things in our lives, and we may put a percentage on that maybe half the time people help us to come to the right decision. But in Buddhism anyway, often the percentage is considered to be much higher than that. Some people would say it's almost the whole of your success in life would be attributable to other people's influences. So it is quite a major source of influence, whether it's parents bringing up children, or whether it's the people we hang out with. All those people have something which is brushing off on us. And in the same way, what we have brushes off on other people too. And this process is what's known as hopefully being a good friend. If what brushes off on others is not good, then that would have another name. Okay. But you can take things I'm going to talk about tonight in 3 senses. The sense in which other people help us out by being a good friend to us, so they would have certain qualities. There's a sense in which we are a good friend to other people in return, and we would need to have certain qualities to do that. And there's also a sense in which we have to be a good friend to ourselves sometimes as well. If one is able to find such a person who is a good friend, then it's said that you should really go out of your way to let all the good stuff brush off on you as much as possible, because such people are hard to find. A noble person, a person who is sort of selfless in the way they share knowledge, advice with you. It's not the same as being an educated person, although what may brush off on you might be some of their education, but it's about habits. So a person who exemplifies certain habits, then those habits brush off on you too. And the importance has a huge effect on the potential to become a more virtuous person for us. And And it said that if we are sure someone can be a good friend to us, even if they chase us away, we should still try to associate with them. Yeah. Because they are probably the most valuable thing that will happen to us in life. So you can take it as people who you might come across in your everyday life, but also reflect back on yourself. How are you doing as a person who others look to for help and support? And what I might add here is being a good friend is not just being the same as being someone's friend. Because otherwise you could just look on your Facebook page and see how many friends you've got and put a number on it, right? And I should warn you that sometimes the more friends you have on Facebook, the less you have in real life. Because it's to do with the quality. And often people who are so-called friends to you just go along with everything you say, may actually let you put yourself in danger. So it's not just people who go along with everything you like. It might be people who are looking out for you even when you are being reckless. Yeah? Said to be 7 qualities of a person who comes up to the standard of being a good friend. And I'll go through them quickly and then I'll explain them in more detail. They'll be endearing. So that's generally what you'll get out of a friend. They're nice to you. They say the things you like to hear. But they also command your respect. I'll come back to these in more detail in a moment. They are praiseworthy in their habits. They are artful in the things they say. They're also artful in listening, so they know when to shut up occasionally. They can deal with deep topics. And last but not least, they don't encourage you towards things that are harmful. So, endearing. How do you reckon you do on this first one? It can come down to many things, even quite basic things, like the manners you have. I hear they've gone out of fashion, but generally if you meet someone for the first time, you get a big first impression of them, and if they are well-mannered, then it tends to be a person who you would like to go into more detail with. Yeah. They may be helpful to you. I don't know if they have helping old ladies across the world, on the road in this country. I don't think anyone walks anymore, do they? But yeah, that would be the sort of helpful thing which Boy Scouts might do in England. People want to be around you if you are an endearing person. And you notice often with quite old people, they have something about them that makes people want to be close to them. Hold their hand and things. It's not something you can put in words very easily, but it's almost like a charisma which they have. They have a lot of loving kindness, so a sense of empathy for others. Okay, so that's all the nice stuff, right? But that's not quite enough. Not if you want to be the sort of friend who actually influences others in a good way. You can't just go along with everything, because sometimes there are things where you might need to put your foot down. Yeah, it's the same in leadership as well. So you need to be accepted before you can teach somebody something. So usually you start with being nice to people, and if you are nice to them to the point that they start to accept you, then on occasion they may actually listen to you if you have advice for them. But generally you wouldn't accept advice from a complete stranger, right? You tend to accept advice from people who you like to some extent, or you have some sort of common ground with. And don't forget that if you ever want to give anyone else advice, you need to sort of make that link first before you can start to sort of turn the conversation around to something which they might not find it so easy to accept from you. Not always allowing another person to do the easiest thing when it's not the best thing. Okay. Yeah, difficult? But generally this is leadership, it's on these two pillars, okay? Sometimes they call it the sun and the moon. The light of the sun, the light of the moon. The moon tends to give us a gentle sort of, makes everything look attractive. The sun can be quite harsh sometimes, yeah, when you need to be cruel to be kind. Third one, a praiseworthy person. Unfortunately, if you're talking about habits, it's not the same as talking about the weather or about the sport, because people actually look at you to see whether you are an example of what you are talking about. Because if you are a hypocrite, then it's like you fall down at the very first, before you've even started. Now, if you're saying to someone, look, you need to be patient, and you look impatient about the fact that they're not patient enough, then, they're not going to really take you very seriously. You must be able to exemplify the good deeds you advocate. Have I told you the Gandhi story yet? No? Oh, good. Well, once upon a time, there was a little boy who was newly diagnosed as being diabetic. So, no more sugar allowed. But the boy kept eating sugar and made himself very ill. And his parents said, don't eat sugar, and he carried on eating sugar. So they thought, well, what can we do about this? So they took him to see Mahatma Gandhi. And Mahatma Gandhi said, well, what is the problem? And he said, well, our son is eating sugar, and we tell him not to eat sugar, and he still eats sugar. So Mahatma Gandhi said, come back and see me in 2 weeks. And he said, well, can't you just tell him to stop eating sugar? No, 2 weeks. So, okay, they went away, come a long way, weren't very happy about this. So 2 weeks later, they came back again. And they said, oh yes, the boy with the diabetic problem. And he said, boy, don't eat sugar. And he said, okay. And after that, he never touched sugar again. And the parents said, good, that's much better. And how come you couldn't just say that 2 weeks ago? And he said, well, 2 weeks ago, I was still eating sugar. So if I had told him at that point to stop eating sugar, my words would have had no weight to them. So I had to stop eating sugar myself first for my advice to that boy to really hit home. So in the same respect, if you are trying to get someone to do something of a certain nature to do with good habits, then you should start with the things that you have managed to master for yourself. And that would tend to be things which people would listen to. And to have done so many good things that other people are considerate of you. It's handy. Being artful in speech. Talking to people is generally simple enough, but not if you want to talk with a purpose. So let's say you are trying to be a good friend to another person, and you are trying to inspire them to do something better with their life. Then you might need to have a certain artfulness in the way you construct your conversation, otherwise known as the art of conversation. That's all well and good, but if it comes to criticizing people, then it takes a lot more artfulness for them to ever want to see you again. So there are certain techniques to this which you probably have learned about in management. But if people keep making mistakes in your workplace, then eventually they ruin and bankrupt your company, don't they? So you can't just say nothing. So you need to find ways of making what is a message that may be rather difficult for them to absorb easier. Sometimes they do it by what's known as sandwiching. Is that a management term? So you say, "Oh, you've done your hair, that is so good, and your shoes, they're really great, and oh, but if you could just sort of mess up a few less of the production tasks which you've been charged with, that would be really good too. And oh yes, and your card's really good today." No, so in between the compliments, they sort of catch the fact that their manager is not really happy with the fact that they are ruining the production line. No. But they feel happy about that because they got lots of compliments along the way. Possibly. Or maybe they see through it. But the idea is that it has to be genuine. Some people can't take criticism directly, then they have to take it indirectly. And some people resort to some quite desperate tactics, like leaving self-help books lying around their home, or leaving stickers in the fridge with like anonymous comments on them, that sort of thing. It depends what is possible. Sometimes you can talk to another person about the subject so that they overhear, and that makes it somehow easier for them because it's not aimed directly at them, and you don't pull people up in front of all their colleagues. You take them a little way out of the room so they don't have to have the embarrassment of loss of face with all their colleagues. You can give it directly, you can tell someone else, you can ask someone else to tell them, maybe someone who they respect more than they respect you. Leave a book lying around. And yes, there's this whole science of artful speech. Make sure that the things you say are true, useful, polite, properly timed, compassionate. Try to smile when you are delivering criticism to people. It makes a big difference because it makes them feel that you are talking about a particular incident or behavior that you don't like. It's not the fact that you don't like them, so you're not doing it. It's not personal criticism, yeah. And praise before fall, so sandwiching. But a person who talks all the time will also fall down if they're trying to be a good friend to others, because sometimes you need to sort of tune into what actually makes that person tick. And the only way to find that out is to sort of listen to them occasionally. Some people, before you get to the bit where they start to listen to you, have a lot of insults for you. So generally a person who is put off by insults may find it hard to be a good friend to certain sorts of people, especially the ones who insult them. But if you are a fairly thick-skinned person, and you can sort of wait until they sort of run out of insults to throw at you, because even the most skilled insulters tend to have a limited stock. Eventually they start repeating themselves, and then they sort of run out. And then after that you have your sort of cue to actually to turn the conversation to what you really want it to be. Yes. Also, being able to deal with deep topics. Small talk in general is generally not that difficult to do. You can even get books about it now, apparently. Sport, cars, whatever. But to deal with deeper topics, again, it takes a certain skill, because you need to have experience of it for yourself. Sometimes to explain things which are spiritually orientated are quite abstract topics, and some people are not able to get their head around quite subtle things. If you are a skilled speaker, you are able to make quite complex things simple for them to understand. For example, if you try to explain the law of karma to someone who works on a farm, then you may think that is a difficult task. But if you can explain law of karma in terms of, well, if you plant beet, you get beet. If you plant wheat, you get wheat. You don't plant wheat and get beets. And it takes some time for it to come up as well. And you can sort of explain a lot by using metaphors. You can adapt the message to the listener's previous knowledge, but generally you have to listen to them first to know what their previous knowledge is. And some people in their enthusiasm forget to start from what the listener is interested in rather than what they're interested in. So you get these sort of cold calls where you haven't even said hello yet and they're already trying to sell you something. Don't try and be like that, okay? But generally meeting people halfway is good. And generally people have a concern or something which they are not happy with, and that is generally a starting point for wanting to change in some way. And last but not least, you may be a person who likes to encourage many things, but you have to be seen to be a person who doesn't just encourage things indiscriminately. So today you say, well, come to the meditation center, but next week you say, well, let's go to the nightclub. And you think, well, maybe this guy just sort of wants me to go everywhere with them. It's like, yeah. So don't send mixed messages. Try to avoid involvement with the roads to ruin, which are, Buddhist technical term, basically things which are slippery slopes to behaviors that you are not in control of, like maybe gambling or liquor. Yeah? So generally you have to have a clear sort of policy on that. So that's all where you're dealing with another person or another person is dealing with you. The qualities which would allow the friendship which you have for another person to actually be transformative in a way that is positive for another person. You may find that you score higher on some of those than others. Yeah? And some are quite hard. Some may take a lifetime's experience to fulfill. Some people are only good at one thing, but that should be the thing maybe that they talk about with other people. And some people say, well, I'm a very shy person. What could I possibly say that would influence anyone else for the better? But even your example can influence other people, and that's still part of being a friend to other people. It's not all about just talking. The example you set. But some people find when they have all this sort of latent enthusiasm and they try to express it for other people and it falls flat, then there's a thing which you need to do before you get to talking to other people, which is also very important, and some might say more important still than talking to other people. And that is to be a good friend to yourself, first of all. Why? Because even in yourself there are two sorts of voices, at least. Sometimes compared to the little angel or the little devil on either side of your head trying to pull you one way or another in the decisions that you make. And being a good friend to yourself means that you need to make sure that you listen more to the little angel side than to the little devil side. It's something difficult, but if you make a habit of it, then the angel has quite a lot to tell you. Also, trying to meditate, you can be considered to be a way of being a good friend to yourself, because it's listening to the better part of your mind, the deeper part. Yeah? And especially for those who are new to meditation, to get that as part of your second nature. Trying to do maybe 20 minutes a day is a very important part of being a good friend to yourself. And it can be any time of day. early in the morning, late at night, your lunch break, all is good. But it should be regular to really stick. And if you want to be a good friend to others, it might include many things. It might be encouraging them to make a donation to a good cause. That's one example. To give out drinking might be another one. Encouraging a person down from the ledge when they're about to throw themselves over it. That will probably put you to the test. But you should bear in mind that without an influence like possibly your influence, people left to their own devices tend to not think of the best thing. It's not the first thing that tends to come to mind. So it does have an influence. And some people are quite unashamed about doing really quite bad things. So, yeah, you should try to be unashamed about encouraging people to do the opposite occasionally. And some people are even willing to put their life on the line to do really bad things. So that's what you're up against. It's basically life-saving in some respect as well. But there are challenges, and some people might say, just as it's a challenge to become a better person yourself, and you think you've got a lot on your plate already with the work which you're doing on yourself to become a better person, if you think you're sort of mastering that to some extent, just try helping the people around you, and you'll realize just how much harder that is to reach out to other people. It is a training in itself, some people say. You can't always help everyone. And generally speaking, the rule of thumb is that if people don't want to be helped, then generally you can't help them either. But if there's a sort of glimmer of a sense in which that person wants to become better, then you have a chink of light to be able to help them with, them to get some leverage. Sometimes it may be easier to help people who have nothing to do with you than it is to help the people close to you. Do you know why that is? Well, often it's because they know all your past. So what you're presenting to them now, they know, well, 2 years ago you weren't much better than I was, it'll wear off. Especially your parents, they tend to, they've seen you since you were born, and they can still picture you doing all the silly things before you became this sensible, noble friend. It tends to sort of cloud their perception of you. So you have your work cut out. But it's not impossible, but generally it takes longer. Sometimes you need to wait for a person to be ready to listen. And if I've got time, I think there's a story to go with that. There's this doctor in Thailand who was notoriously hard to convince to do anything charitable, because he is such a clever person, and everyone had to look up to him, and if anyone said to do something charitable for his future or his his spiritual values, then he would always dismiss them out of hand. And then one day a bunch of young people came to his office, and they were saying, well, look, there's this monk's ordination going on, and you could maybe you don't need to join the ordination, but maybe you could support some others to do this, young people like ourselves, and be able to have this opportunity. And he was standing with his hands on his hips, and he's about to give them a barrage of insults. And he noticed with his thumb, oh, that's strange, something there that there before. And being a doctor, he knew very well, if that's my kidneys, then that's the start of something which is obviously not natural. And he thought, oh, I'm the doctor, but now I'm the one who's getting ill here. And it was some sort of start of some sort of cancerous growth on his kidneys, which he just noticed because the fact he was with his hands on his hips. So at that moment he had a complete change of tune, and that was obviously his time for seeing a different perspective of life, that he wasn't just the one to help others, but he had now become someone who needed help as well. And he welcomed the people into his office to help with that particular cause they were talking about. So sometimes people need to have something which they have some sense of suffering before they will open up to things like causes of suffering and cessation of suffering, and eventually the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is something you need to bear in mind, that if a person's not ready to listen to any advice you're giving them now, and you're pretty sure that it is good advice, then it may not be quite the right time. And you do need to have that patience to wait for the time when they are more receptive. Yeah. And if you want to encourage other people to come for meditation, especially the start of the meditation skills series, which will commence in a couple of weeks, which is sort of designed very much for people who are starting out as new meditators. Please feel free to try out your good friend skills by distributing some of those white brochures for people who you think might be interested in that. Yeah.
So I'll put this, I guess, on the meditation stage, and before you leave, if you haven't got one, please get one. I've also been sending them out via, it's on our website, etc. Please feel free to take a couple to pass out to friends, because if you look at the sessions, they're very, very interesting, and they're going to help inspire people to meditate. And essentially, when you become a meditator, all these topics that the Venerable talks about becomes instilled in you automatically. So these are just things that are very innate within us that comes out when we meditate. So these qualities of being a good friend, naturally they're going to start shining through. You're going to start building better habits for yourself, and other people will see that. So it's just all in all a good thing. So hopefully you'll come, and if you feel like there are other people in your life that will benefit, please encourage them to come as well. Last week, we're going to kind of connect by touching each other on the back, kind of as a chain of energy. That way we all are offering this donation or this offering together. So
and you can make a wish.
Yes, make a wish. Actually, I always try to encourage people, even when you put money in the donation box in the front, that you make a wish as you're doing that. But definitely as we're offering it, you make a wish as well, putting your mind at the center of your body, and then trying to find that stillness inside as we make that offering. Okay? All right, so everyone will just get up, please. And if this is your first time, this is definitely going to be an experience for you. If this is not your first time, get used to it, because we're going to do this every week. All right, so if I can get Nathan, if you can come up in the middle, or Michael. Patrons, please. Mike, don't be afraid, so we can hurry from. No, you, Michael, Mike.
Okay.
All right, and you can put your, and then everybody else, if we can kind of connect as a train of energy, just, all right, hold on, let's make sure everyone is with us. Yeah. This is very similar to what we did last week. And then at this time, as we're about to make the offering, is everyone connected? We put our mind at the center of the body like we're meditating. And then we make a wish on our good deed. And let's make the offering.
May all the good things you wish for in life come true easily, and may all of you have a clear and unhindered path towards inner peace in your meditation, and the encouragement to be a good friend to yourself and good friend to others, now and in every lifetime till entering upon nirvana.
To rejoice in your merits. So that's what, just let you know, whenever we make an offering, if you ever hear the word satu, it's just basically rejoicing in your good deeds. Okay, if everyone can get back to the meditation mat,
enjoy health, success, and
we still need to
prosperity in
pay
life.
respects.